Oscars, and I like to do music in my free time, so I decided to make an instrument. I got inspired by Koka Nikoladze, composer who makes these very unconventional instruments out of different motors and different parts that would otherwise go to trash, and this kind of choice develops a very interesting sound. And I had decided that I want to try and recreate something that he did. He made this stepper motor machine, and depending on how fast the motor would be turning, it would change the pitch of the motor. Can you go from low to high again? And stepper motors work by tiny steps that they can take, so they're very precise, so you can actually tune them and play them just like you would play a piano, for example. After I figured out how to connect one stepper motor, I added a MIDI library that let me connect my computer, and I could send a note and it would be translated to how fast the motor should be turning. I decided to add 4 different motors, so they would have a different range, and I could also make chords playing multiple notes, one note for each motor. A challenge that I ran into when trying to do this project was that motors are not meant to be instruments, and generally cheaper motors are definitely not going to be as consistent. There's some notes that the motor would just definitely not want to try and play, or it would start freaking out and going back and forth instead of turning consistently, which would then alter the sound of the instrument and make it more difficult to play in a conventional way. Having some kind of analog signal that has these imperfections that you can't really control or don't understand how they work, or it just does something random, that can be the magic that takes your project to another level. That's what I'm going to stick with, having a little bit of an imperfect tuning, because it's pretty much impossible to tune it perfectly, and also experimenting with different ways to pick up the sound. So I had decided that I would use a microphone to pick up the higher frequencies from the actual motors vibrating. I would also have a guitar pickup put between 2 of the motors that would pick up the sound of the motor turning. And because I was using a pickup as well, I could add all kinds of effects on top of it. I could add distortion and delay, whatever you can imagine, really. Another big part of the project was that depending on what you put on top of a motor that is vibrating, you would change the timbre, just like how you could tell apart a note that is played by a violin versus a note that is played by a piano or a trumpet. You could change the way that the instrument sounded depending on what you would glue on top of the motors.
Listen to the drone box without objects attached to the motors. Now with, without.
Something like a cup could vibrate many things inside of it. Something like a pine cone can make a more bassy sound. I've made a very imperfect instrument at a time where everything can be pretty much perfect. Everybody has access to perfectly in tune digital instruments. We've gotten to a point where it's more interesting for us to find something that has a little bit of imperfection in it. And this is something that a lot of producers and musicians crave nowadays, which is why I think that this project is very special.